longer. I think it will be easier if we just get through the material and then I answer your questions. So I know Amani is here answering some stuff, but sorry, I think I'll continue for now. I know I said that before. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Community Arts Grant in depth. So the Community Arts Grant might be abbreviated to CA, but rarely. I like to use the full name so everybody knows what we're talking about. These grants provide project support for arts and cultural activities that are open to the general public, and they're focused on really providing, that artists growth, organization growth, allowing organizations and artists to do new projects, and then also balancing that with like, what is the public benefit? How is the public going to engage with this project? And is it offering something new that the public might not have been able to have access to previously? As we said, grant awards are all determined by peer panel review made up of community members. And this was previously called the project grant. It's the same as basically the same exact program. I'll give some examples of previously funded projects. These are actually, most of these are from a couple of years ago. So we funded Gwen Laster to do a great program at the Howland Public Library in Beacon called Classical Connections, Afro-Atlantic, 21st Century and Beyond, which kind of was part performance, part presentation about the history of classical African descendant composers from from a huge span of time. It was a really wonderful high level project offered for free at the library, like right in the middle of Beacon. It was a wonderful thing that we were really proud to fund. Millbrook Literary Festival takes place at the Millbrook Library, and you'll see that some of these, both of these are examples of projects that took place at libraries, but weren't actually directly, the direct applicants were not the libraries. The direct applicants were other groups involved, and they were using a library as a venue. The Millbrook Literary Festival is a great event that brings a ton of local authors from around the country, around the world, to do readings, to have discussions. There's a book sale, panel discussions. So it's really just a great event to promote literary arts. The Beekman Library did a great program where they did a summer concert series outside on their green lawn. And so this is another typical type of thing we get applications for, libraries or local organizations wanting to do a concert series in the summer. Dusklit was a great program that took place a few years ago, which was a big, in Orange County, it was a big, kind of like an evening festival where all these artists set up booths or set up tents and did a public art performance. And that it was so varied in what was offered, from like tarot readings to performance art, to music, to interactive activities, to, experimental mediums. So that was a really exciting project for us to fund. We love funding festivals. We love funding things that are going to get a lot of artists paid. We funded for several years the Poetry Fest in Poughkeepsie, which is a great program run by Poet Gold that takes place right in the middle of Poughkeepsie, the King Hackett, and it has performances, workshops, interactive activities where every year they select a poet, a luminary poet where they everyone reads from that poet's work and they create a collaborative video from it. So this is a really wonderful event, and it's focused on poetry, which is a medium that we get fewer applications for. Common Ground Farm has received funding for a couple of years now for their series of sustainable textile workshops, which include things like teaching mending, teaching dyeing, teaching, working with natural fibers and materials. So it's a really wonderful marriage of what the farm is focused on, all of these natural materials, and bringing that into an artistic context that's artistically focused. And so they are not primarily an arts or cultural organization, but they were eligible, they are eligible to apply for this fund. Any nonprofit organization can, as long as the project itself is arts focused, like this one was. And they did a great thing too, where they set up a lot at the Beacon Farmers Market, and that brought in, people who don't typically engage with arts programming. I love to use this example of MAD, Midtown Arts District, and their program, the DRAW, Department of Regional Arts Workers. They have great programming in Kingston. And a couple of years ago, they got funding for their costume drawing series where, it's a figure drawing series, but instead of it being nude models, it is costumes. So it actually provided an opportunity for people who are costume designers or fashion designers to show off their work, to pose with a set, and made it more family friendly and more appropriate for kids. So it's a really great program that, brought in another artistic medium into something that a lot of artists are familiar with and need access to. It was also a great outlet for cosplayers, which was really awesome. We really enjoyed that. And so, okay, the goals overall for the Community Arts Grant, now that we've talked about a bunch of examples, and these goals are for our program as a whole. Not any one project can achieve all of these things. It's more that we are trying to see that we're doing this with everything that we end up funding. So make quality arts programming available to all residents in our region, particularly to communities with limited access to the arts. Assist with emerging arts organizations, individual artists, and grassroots groups to provide arts and cultural events, and support the cultural expression of our area's diverse communities, and support Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQIA, and disabled artists, and support arts and cultural organizers from these groups who are leading this work. So those are our overall goals. And again, we're trying to achieve this as a whole, in the scope of what we end up funding. So but you want to think about, any grant program that you apply to, it's good to identify goals, funding priorities, and think about how you can align your project with the goals and priorities. It's even good to think about, borrowing some of this language from the guidelines, in your writing, because it shows that you've read the guidelines. It shows that you're trying to align yourself with the program. And for the panelists, it's helpful for them because, they're reading a lot of material, and it's good for them to be able to make a connection, help them get to the connection you're hoping they'll make. Funding priorities for this year, you'll see they're basically the same as last year. New programming in our region and projects initiated by new applicants, program support for arts organizations, small or grassroots organization, and artist initiated projects. So that's priority, but any nonprofit organization is eligible to apply for this. Support for arts and cultural programming and of organizations and grassroots groups who are led by Black, Latino, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQ+, and or disabled arts workers, as well as hiring and paying artists who are part of those groups. Programming which engages underserved populations and which demonstrates a strong, well-considered community outreach and promotion plan to reach these constituencies. Dance, film, video, media arts, writing, poetry, performance art, and any other emerging art forms. These are all areas that would be considered priority for funding. Okay, now I'll talk about project eligibility. And you'll see there are fewer bullet points on these slides for each category because I went over the ones that apply to all categories at the beginning of the session, or if you're watching the video in the first video. Okay, so ineligible for the Community Arts Grant are projects that are not open to the general public. And then please see the guidelines for the complete list. You'll see, I actually didn't mention this earlier and maybe should have, each category has their own guidelines. So, you'll see that there's some repeat information there, but it's just to help you realize, what is included within each individual category, because there are little differences here and there. Allowable expenses. So these are really, our focus, what we would most like to fund, and, would be a huge bonus to you if they are the majority of what you're asking for in your budget when you're requesting funding from us. So first is artist fees, then community outreach, advertising, marketing efforts, direct administrative expenses or planning and preparation expenses for a proposed event, supplies and materials needed to execute the proposed project, and efforts to increase accessibility to arts programming. I would say artist fees and the efforts to increase accessibility to arts programming are really, the most prioritized, especially artist fees. It's often that panelists will get really excited if they see an application is entirely for artist fees or majority for artist fees. Just keep that in mind. Ineligible expenses for the community arts program. So the purchase of permanent equipment items, creation of textbook or school materials. It sounds random for this category, but we have gotten requests for this previously. And fees paid to board members of the nonprofit or nonprofit fiscal sponsors. So if a nonprofit is applying to us, we cannot, if you're the direct applicant, we cannot pay any fees to your board members for any activity, even if it's associated with the project. And then again, of course, see the guidelines for the complete list. Some more on inclusion and accessibility. Again, all community arts grants funded programs must be open to the general public. And as I talked about in the first part of this, we really encourage thoughtful outreach and efforts to seek input from all groups in our region and specific outreach and inclusion efforts to underserved audiences. And again, I'll say, thinking about, that these, when we're using this term, underserved audiences is not monolithic. It includes a huge diversity of people and ways that you could conduct outreach that will be specific for the people you are actually trying to reach. So although I'm using this language here in the info session, because I have to talk so broadly about all the different types of projects that might come in, I would not use broad language like this in your actual proposal. In your proposal, it really helps to be specific about who you're trying to reach and what are the specific outreach methods or inclusion efforts that you'll take to get them there and to include them in your project, or talking about, as we listed as a priority for funding, if you're an organization that is led by led by people who are part of a traditionally underrepresented or underserved group, to talk about who is a part of the planning process, the feedback process, in the planning and the brainstorming and the implementation of the project. So it's on both sides, the people involved in putting on the project, the artists getting paid, and then who the audience is. And then just a note about workshops. So in the case of workshops and participatory programs, participant recruitment must be open to the general public. However, you might say, it doesn't mean that anyone can drop in on the day of. You could have it that this is a workshop, we're promoting at the library, anyone can just come on the day that's happening. You could also say, anyone can register in advance for this workshop and we're going to cap it at 20 people. If that's what's appropriate for the workshop, that is fine. It's also appropriate to say, place age or skill level restrictions on who can participate in the program. So you could say this is just for grade school kids, or this is just for adult learners, whatever is appropriate for the program. Okay, now I'm going to talk about how the different ways that you can apply to this program. Before I even get into it, I'm going to again say that we offer these different scenarios as a way to accommodate all the variety of needs that our applicants have. The way that you choose to apply to this program is really, based on what is best for you and what makes most sense for the project. The most straightforward way to apply this program is applying directly as a nonprofit. If you're a nonprofit organization, you can just apply directly. Nonprofits who are eligible must be a nonprofit or a 501c3 incorporated in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County, New York State, must have a board of directors, must have a non-discrimination policy in place. If you applied to us previously and we have your non-discrimination policy, we will not, on file already, we won't ask for it again. If you're a new applicant, after you submit your application, we will reach out to you and ask you to provide the non-discrimination policy, and it should not be dated after you submit the application. It should have already been in place before you submit your application. And really, it really is something that should be a part of organizations' bylaws when they're putting together their organization to begin with. Must be in adherence of the Nonprofit Revitalization Act of 2013. If you need more information, NICON, the New York State Council on Nonprofits, is a wonderful resource for this information. And libraries, private universities, government entities, meaning municipalities and cities, and tribal organizations are eligible. Who is ineligible? Public school districts, public universities, New York State agencies and departments, including city schools, county level agencies and departments are not eligible. For-profit organizations and LLCs are not eligible. Non-incorporated chapters of organizations whose parent organization is not located in Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster County are not eligible. Trying to think of an example of this. I won't say an example because I'm not certain of how some of these set up their chapters, but if you're a chapter and you know that the organization is incorporated in California, for example, that is not an eligible organization to apply directly for this program. And then of course, Arts Mid-Hudson, our staff and board are not eligible. Again, if you apply directly to NISCA, you are for fiscal year 2023, you are not eligible to apply the community arts grant. And if you are not sure, please reach out to me. I have a complete list. Further, NISCA, if you apply directly to NISCA, you cannot benefit from any community arts funded programs. This includes space rental, box office fees, or marketing as a part of their annual programming. So if you're a venue and you apply directly to NISCA and an individual artist reaches out to you and says, I want to do I'm going to apply for a community arts grant and I want to do that event at your venue, they can do it at your venue, but you cannot benefit financially in any way from the project. This is frankly a rule, a requirement that is a little difficult to navigate. It's a little confusing. And I really encourage you, if this is something you're encountering or something you're concerned about, reach out to us and let's discuss it. And you'll hear me say this a lot, but this is a public funding program. There's a lot of bureaucratic stuff in here. And my job is to be the encyclopedia of all of this stuff so that I can answer your questions. So if your wheels are spinning and you're like, I just don't understand, try not to let your wheels spin for too long. Make an appointment with me, send me an email so that I can help you navigate this. And last thing, if an organization applied directly to NISCA for fiscal year 23, you're not eligible to serve as a fiscal sponsor or a partner organization for any other applications. You'll hear what that means in a moment. If you're a nonprofit applying directly, you'll need to include a list of your staff, a list of your board, a financial statement, which shows both income and expenses for the applicant's most recent fiscal year. Towns and cities do not need to submit actually any of the three of these documents. The only thing that you might submit is a staff list if there's like key staff that's involved. But for nonprofits, you need to submit all of these. And then and then proof of nonprofit status, you'll see the guidelines. There's a variety of documents that you could provide. Nonprofits who apply directly for your own project, you may also serve as a fiscal sponsor or a community partner for unlimited additional projects. I don't recommend doing, unlimited, like doing 10, but you could serve as a fiscal sponsor for 2 additional projects or serve as a fiscal sponsor on one and a community partner on another. It does not negatively impact your application. If anything, actually, it often, I really from this past year, it came up a couple of times where the panel said, oh, and now we're getting to their application and we just read one where they're fiscally sponsoring. And I'm really glad that they, are helping out another artist or helping out another group by being their fiscal sponsor and helping them to apply. So it is not a knock against, sometimes I hear from organizations that they don't want to serve as a fiscal sponsor because, or a community partner because they don't want to be competing against themselves. I would really encourage you not to think about it that way, but instead to think about it as another opportunity for the panel to be thinking about your organization and thinking about how you're contributing to the artistic and arts and cultural scene in the area. Okay, and now I'm going to talk a lot more about fiscal sponsorship and community partnership. So I'll do that by talking about how you will apply as an individual or an unincorporated group. So individual artists, individual applicants and unincorporated groups are strongly encouraged to apply to this grant opportunity. And that's why we offer a few different ways that you can do so. So individual applicants or contact persons for the unincorporated group must be at least 18 years of age at the time of submission and may not be enrolled in a full-time degree program. Part-time degree programs are okay. Must live in and have a legal address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County in order to be eligible. In order to apply as an individual or an unincorporated group, you must work with a nonprofit organization, either serving as your fiscal sponsor or your community partner. Individual applicants may designate a nonprofit they will work with prior to applying, or Arts Mid-Hudson will pair them with a nonprofit who will act as their community partner in the projects once they are awarded funding. So let me explain what that means. You could either submit this application saying, I know who my fiscal sponsor is, or I know who my community partner is, and go ahead and submit it with all their information. We do not want this to be an insurmountable barrier to apply, however. So if you are unable to secure a nonprofit to serve in either of those capacities, you can apply directly on your own and indicate on the application that you do not have a nonprofit to work with yet, and that you need Arts Mid-Hudson's help to pair you with one if you are awarded funding. If that happens, we will pair you with a community partner. And I'll explain why when we talk about community partnership, but not with a fiscal sponsor. We're able to then compare you with a community partner. This is totally eligible. I encourage you to do so if you're not able to secure a nonprofit, but just know, the panel is going to then look at those applications with a little bit of extra scrutiny, because it has to be something that we are confident that we're going to be able to pair you up with somebody. Right. So if they're concerned that there are major problems with the proposal, or concerned that this might be, difficult to find a partner for, that could impact your proposal. Not your eligibility, but your competitiveness. Nonprofits serving as community partners or fiscal sponsors must meet all the nonprofit eligibility requirements in the guidelines for direct applicants. So all the eligibility requirements I just went over for a nonprofit applying directly. If a nonprofit is going to serve in either of these two capacities, they have to meet those eligibility requirements. And please see the guidelines for complete information and required documents. Okay, now I'm going to go over the key differences between community partnership and fiscal sponsorship. Again, we offer both of these to accommodate your needs. And if you don't, this is the number one question I answer is, should I do a community partnership or a fiscal sponsorship? So please don't hesitate to reach out and we can talk it out. So for community partnership, the individual applicant or the contact person for the unincorporated group is the legal applicant. They are the person that will sign the contract with Arts Mid-Hudson, and they are the person that we will send the check to, and the check will be written in their name. Okay, so that is the only way that an individual or an unincorporated group can receive direct funds from this program, is if you have a community partner. Community partner must be incorporated in the applicant's county of residence, right? So if I live in Ulster County and I'm going to apply to this program as an individual artist, and I'm going to get a community partner, I have to find a nonprofit organization that is incorporated in Ulster County, right? Everything's happening in Ulster County. The level of and the community partner's role is to lend appropriate support to the program, left intentionally vague, because the level of support is to be determined by the applicant, the individual applicant, and the community partner. So it's totally up to you. Are they going to help you with marketing? Are they going to help you with some administrative needs? Are they going to lend you their space, lend you use of their printer, right? Or not, or only one of those things. They should be lending some kind of support, but really, the main role they're playing is they're assisting in the project in some way. They're an additional vetting, on the project, their involvement. But the project is ultimately under the individual applicant or the unincorporated group. They are the legal applicant, and the funding is going directly to them. The funding does not pass through the community partner at all. The funding does not get sent to the community partner. And so for this reason, if you're trying to find a nonprofit to work with, and you're having trouble because they're nervous to have the funding pass through their system for some reason, or they need to get board approval and there's no time to do that, whatever it might be, community partnership is a good option to bring up with them, because the funding will not be passing through their system. A reason why you might not want to go with community partnership is because the funding is going directly to the individual applicant or a contact person for the unincorporated group. So that is going to show up as income for that year when you do your taxes. And that is up to you and your accountant to work out how you want to deal with that, but that is a consideration. So if you don't want the funding coming directly to you, and you need another entity for it to pass through, then fiscal sponsorship is probably the better option. Okay, now we'll talk about fiscal sponsorship. So the nonprofit, in the case of fiscal sponsorship, the nonprofit fiscal sponsor is the legal applicant. That is the key difference. Now the nonprofit is the legal applicant. We're sending the check to the nonprofit. We're signing the contract with the nonprofit. And the individual applicant, the individual artist, or the individual involved, or the unincorporated group involved, they are listed as the sponsored artist on the application. The project must take place in the county where the fiscal sponsor is located. The sponsored individual group must be located in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County. So this is the one situation where, say you're an artist and you live in Ulster County and you want to do a project in Dutchess County. If you get a fiscal sponsor in Dutchess County, then you can do the project there. The money is going to Dutchess County. They're the legal applicant and it's taking place there. We cannot, this is all, again, everybody has to be, though, in one of the 3 counties we serve. We can't have like an artist who lives in Westchester being fiscally sponsored by an organization in Dutchess County. Really, the way to deal with that would just be have the nonprofit in Dutchess County apply directly and hire, the artist from wherever. The fiscal sponsor is not required to make a financial contribution to the project, and applicants may select this option if they do not wish for grant funds to be paid directly to them, or if they require greater administrative support from a nonprofit organization. Okay, so that is it in a nutshell. I'm sure there are questions that I will answer over the course of the next, several weeks, and probably at the end of the session. So I'll move on from here. But also add, for individual artists applying directly, there is a checklist of additional attachments. You'll need to provide a proof of residency, which should be dated no earlier than 2022. A letter of commitment if you're applying with a community partner. And a template of that letter can be found on our website. If you're going with the fiscal sponsorship route, you need to provide the fiscal sponsor staff list, board list, financial statement, proof of nonprofit status, because they are the legal applicant. So we need the same documents from them as we needed as if they were applying directly. And then you'll do a letter of agreement, which will lay out the terms of what the fiscal sponsorship will be. And again, you can find that template on our website. That's a really great, if you're just getting started trying to find a fiscal sponsor, a community partner, download those letters from our website. And then you can, that's a good thing to email to them or send to them, or bring with you to a meeting to talk about what the requirements are going to be and what it will look like. Okay, and some tips about submitting a proposal for the community arts grant. Again, deadline is March 16th of this year at midnight. I'm not going to click on this link. The link is available on our website. When I do we'll do a session on the application. So just look out for that and we'll go over the application in depth. If you require assistance in completing the online submission form, please do not hesitate to contact us. But if you could give us as much advance notice as possible, we would really appreciate it. There are some people, of course, who do not have readily available access to a computer frequently, or have the access to be able to work on something like this. We are more than willing to help you identify the tools that you need in order to submit your application. I have even had people dictate responses to me and I've entered them in for them. So it really just don't hesitate to ask if there's something that you think you need from us. Some tips about the budget. I really recommend working on your budget and your narrative at least together, if not working on your budget first. I think about the budget as a roadmap for the rest of your project on what you'll do. It's a really good way to focus in on what you're asking us to fund and having your narrative align with what the funding expenses are. You'll see on the budget that there is an explanation column. This is a very important column. Please use it. Please, if you write, you'll see that there are different categories. Artist fee, for example, maybe it's 5,000. It's all going to artist fees. Make sure that you are explaining that in the explanation column how you got to that number. Might be something as simple as 5 artists at $1,000 each, or something like that. Just explain how you got to that number. Check the guidelines. We went over them in this session, but double check the guidelines, triple check the guidelines for allowable and ineligible expenses. There will be a place on the application. You'll see that our budget only asks the spreadsheet, the form only asks how you will spend your grant request amount. So if you're requesting $5,000, it should only show how you'll spend the $5,000. There is a written question that asks, do you have any other expenses associated with the project and how are you going to pay for those? So that's your place to talk about, maybe if you got another grant or if you're going to have tickets, sell tickets and have income, there's a place to talk about that. And a helpful formula to think about is your total expenses minus any income you have coming into the project should equal your grant request amount. That's how you show that your budget is balanced. And if you have any questions about that, working on the budget, please have an appointment with us. Please ask us to review a draft of your budget. I can review a draft in 5 minutes. It takes, do not hesitate on the day of the deadline. Don't hesitate. Just throw it in my inbox and I'll try to get back to you. It really is a quick thing for us to check. Of course, it's better if you do it far in advance, especially because I recommend doing your budget first. But yeah, just don't hesitate to reach out to us. It's one of the easiest areas to make a little error on and an easy place for us to look at and fix. The review criteria for the community arts grant: first, artistic merit, project feasibility, impact of the project. And these are the 3 criteria that the panel will score on. So they can offer between 1 and 4 points for each of these 3 review criteria. I'll talk about this more in the application session too. I'll give more tips about review. But these, you want to think about these review criteria, and this is laid out more in the guidelines, because that's how you will be judged, is in these terms. For previously funded projects, they might ask for, it's not a numeric review criteria. It's not something they're assigning a score to, but they will consider, any information from previously funded projects' final reports and look for evidence that the project is moving towards further growth or move towards more self-sustainability in the future. And then, of course, they're going to be considering if it addresses one or more of the priorities for 2023 funding. And both of these things, they kind of roll in to their review criteria up here. So they might think about, the priorities in terms of impact, for example. All right. And last thing for community arts grant is some first steps. If you're getting started, if you need a fiscal sponsor or community partner, that is the first thing that you should start thinking about, because sometimes organizations need to get board approval, or they need, you need to get some documents from them. So I would work on that right away. Review the online application form and guidelines, familiarize yourself with what's going to be asked of you. Complete the project eligibility form so that we can give you some feedback on whether we, think your project is eligible for funding. Or organize digital copies of any required attachments, because that's, that can be really hectic to try to pull together at the last minute. So try to get that ahead of time. And at any time during your process, make an appointment with us if you have questions.